All right, it is now, what's the time? 10:03. Everybody's ready? Good morning, everybody. Good morning. 10:03. I think we're ready to get started. First item on the agenda, someone remind me real quick? It's just the public comment.
We have none signed up. It doesn't look like anybody here.
I think everybody's a presenter, right? Okay, perfect. All right, second is the...
Minutes from April?
Yep, the minutes. I've been fine. I looked at watched the recording, but any concerns, questions about the minutes from April, the last meeting?
Nope.
All right, I approve. Motion to approve them. There you go. Motion approved.
And then if any board members have any introductory comments?
Not at this time. No. It would be great. I do know we have a full schedule. I do appreciate everybody putting everything in and packing it in and to accommodate our snow days. I appreciate that. There's a lot going on, and I want to make sure that we get to everybody today, okay?
Sounds good, so we will jump in then. We
All
do
right.
have, as you mentioned, a packed agenda today. We have three topics. One is advanced academics, two is environmental literacy and sustainability, and third is around social studies.
Okay.
So we're going to start off with Dr. Jessica Reinhardt, our supervisor of advanced academics, and she is going to take it from there.
Perfect.
Good morning, everyone. So the purpose of this presentation is really to provide you with updates regarding gifted and talented programming in Frederick County Public Schools. And in Maryland, we have mandates that are set forth by the Code of Maryland Regulations for gifted and talented education. And these were approved in 2019 for the purpose of strengthening gifted and talented student identification and service delivery to those students across schools in Maryland. They established the GT students as an accountability group on the Maryland School Report Card, and with that comes annual manual report or mandatory reporting, which would include something like the local ESSA consolidated plan. And it sets forth really components across the areas of GT identification, service delivery, professional learning, and this monitoring and reporting. So you're going to really hear about our alignments. These are really, this is a summary of some of our key strategies in Frederick County Public Schools that we have instituted to align with those mandates. And the first being the Early Talent Development Program. So all students in Frederick County Public Schools pre-K to 2 engage in early talent development. We have universal screening for gifted and talented identification. That occurs during grades 2 and 5 by way of the cognitive abilities test. Okay, so that's foundational to the identification. We have GT cluster grouping now in grades 3 through 5 at every elementary school. There is an ongoing talent spotting and access to advanced academics resources whenever readiness has been demonstrated by students. And there's also professional learning and teacher support. A lot of that teacher support comes through that deployment of the itinerant teacher specialists at our elementary and middle schools. And then we have our parent information sessions and outreach. So I mentioned universal screening. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that because it, as I said, it's foundational to the GT identification processes. Those are processes that use multiple measures for identification, ability, performance, and potential of students. And you should know that our current rising ninth graders, so our current 8th graders, our rising 9th graders are the first universally screened cohort. They were screened during the 2018-19 school year. In terms of 3 through 12, services begin at grade 3. 24% of the students are identified as gifted and talented, and at least 5% of the students are identified at each elementary and middle school. And we know that expansion continues to occur, and so we really rely on our partners in the Multilingual Education Office and on our special education teams to really ensure that access is extended to our students from special populations. Really critically important. So the next 2 slides you would not have seen, these were presented during November, the annual KPI or Key Performance Indicator presentation. And this was for the presentation for 15A, which centers on the gifted and talented identification, really mirroring the population of students within Frederick County Public Schools. And this shows you the universally screened students in grades 3 through 8. Remember that first group. And the colored bars really show you the percent of the GT identified students from each of the groups, and then the horizontal lines show you the actual percent of FCPS students in each group. You can see that our Asian students from 2 or more races and our white students are well represented. And you can note there the baseline is 2022. So since 2022, you see where the growth has gone. And then moving forward into special services, we really think that there has been that steady progress for identification of students receiving free and reduced meals. And you can see also, though, that things have leveled off a bit for our multilingual education service recipients and students who are on IEPs. And like I said earlier, that's why that partnership with our multilingual education offices and special education office are really, really critical. So I mentioned that COMAR mandates we have to provide services to these students. And so let's start with elementary school, the program delivery model. Now, we don't have to provide services until grade 3, and indeed we do. We identify and they start receiving formal services in grade 3. But prior to then, we have early talent development, and we provide that through what is called the GEARS program, growing elementary advanced academics readiness in students. But we also have fluid ability grouping in math and reading. So when students, again, are demonstrating readiness, we want to challenge them a little bit more. And in grades 3 through 5, that's where you see the formalized services. And it's an ongoing identification process, but what we do is we serve the students through GT cluster grouping at each of our schools. And the services are provided during Tier 1 small group instruction, and also just-in-time differentiation during the whole group portion of those instructional blocks. So you see it can be domain-specific service delivery. We also provide Tier 2 supports, for example, through iReady, coaching and goal setting, as well as coaching students to distinguished on MCAP. Moving ahead to middle school, we have the Highly Able Learner Program, and that serves students who are advanced and identified as gifted and talented. And it's really important because there's that growth and expansion of opportunities for students who demonstrate readiness. So we have the Honors ELA and math classes, and within those classes, we have the GT cluster groups. That's the model. We know that we have accelerated pathways for math. So the math pathway program that begins at the elementary level continues on through middle school, preparing students in that program for geometry by grade 8. And then we also have HAL clusters within the science and social studies classes. What really is exciting is what comes next at high school, right? Because students are always looking ahead. And we're proud that we have opportunities continuing to expand for students who, again, demonstrate readiness. We have the honors courses, we have advanced placement coursework, a variety of courses there, and then the opportunity to participate in International Baccalaureate at Urbana High School. I do want to mention We have 3 post-CCR pathways. I think you've heard about these before. That first one is known as the Maryland AP option. And so students can pursue that as it's a sequence of classes. But by way of pursuing that pathway, they can also qualify for a number of AP Scholars distinctions. So that's a nice bonus. And then you've heard about the dual enrollment in early college, as well as the all-important career and technical education. We know that as our students who are identified as gifted and talented travel up through the school system, that we need to have a variety of opportunities for them in terms of where their interests lie. And then finally, let's talk about the school supporting professional learning for our teachers and for our schools. I mentioned itinerant specialists. Those are our advanced academics teacher specialists. I also mentioned early talent development. All of our grades pre-K through 2 teachers are trained in this early talent development. We provide support to our cluster group teachers. It's very essential. And we have on-the-job kind of training and modeling shoulder-to-shoulder experiences for them, as well as the provision of HQIM-aligned materials for them to use their advanced academics resources. And then we know that we do have students who underachieve, who are identified as gifted and talented. This is a national and international challenge. And so we have tier 2 supports for those students. And what we really want to do is close excellence gaps. Diving just a little bit deeper into professional learning, there are opportunities for co-planning at the schools. There's the collaboration through the accelerated learning process. You've heard about ALP. And then for outside of the school day, we have workshops provided through the FCPS Gifted Learner Series for them. All right, so celebration, we have a little video. And what's really important, Ballinger Creek Elementary School is the newest recipient of the EGATE Award, Excellence in Gifted and Talented Education. It's a very rigorous portfolio process that they spend 30 months compiling. Over 21 indicators in 4 areas. It's very, very rigorous. And so what's important about that is that they exemplify not only the every child, every day spirit of that, but also the vision of advanced academics. And our vision is really to discover, uncover, and grow gifted and advanced learner potential. So you're going to see a lot of that come through, as well as some of the highlights from my presentation. You'll see a little bit of that represented in the video, and you might want to check it out later. I know we're kind of rushed for time. Mary's getting us set up.
At Ballinger Creek Elementary School, we champion our diversity. Our Tier 3 designation refers to a variety of complexity factors, such as student mobility, concentration of poverty, students with disabilities, multilingual learners, and more. One of the ways that we're able to ensure access and equity within our instructional programming is offering innovative models like high-dose tutoring. During this walk to read time, students within our building are outlined as needing advanced academic coursework. We're able to allow those students to go to a variety of instructional staff and receive this advanced programming within literacy during that time.
Ballinger Creek Elementary School actually leads the county by focusing on a gifted and talented goal within their school improvement plan. This shows that we have a priority of focusing on all student learners and working on across the grade levels.
Challenging the students is very important. I want them to be invested in their learning, and I feel like if you challenge them, then they're 10 toes down, digging in, working hard, and that they're stimulated. I want them to take responsibility for their own learning and to be successful. I guess that's the ultimate goal.
I always want to be challenged. I don't like it when stuff are too easy. It's just nice to have something hard every once in a while.
If you're not challenged, you're just staying where you are.
and your mindset's not really changing. And if it doesn't change, then you're not really getting smarter.
Primary talent development is a priority focus through the use of the Office of Advanced Academics program called GEARS, or Growing Advanced Academics Readiness in Students. We use a variety of different learner behavior tasks, such as a persistence task where students try to match tangrams into images, or focusing on creativity by taking shapes and turning it into other images. And we utilize this to focus on more than just the performance of the academics, but also looking at beyond that and seeing what students are showing up in areas to make sure that we are supporting them in every way.
We meet with teachers regularly to examine formative data and ensure that all students have access to advanced coursework.
We employ a lot of research-based and research-informed strategies in curriculum. We use the OR model, not the AND model, making sure that we are looking at multiple pieces of evidence and multiple pieces of data to make sure that we are inclusive.
The designation of E-Gate status at Ballinger Creek Elementary School is an important one because it highlights the first school in Frederick County Public Schools being Tier 3 and allowing all students, regardless of their background and their diversity, access to gifted and talented education.
Anybody like to get us started on some questions?
So, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it, that's why I asked.
written down.
I have mine written down, so you go right ahead.
So, can you define a little bit in more detail what the GT cluster grouping actually is, how that functions within a classroom?
That's a good question. So it's a research-informed model for service delivery. And when we have GT cluster groups, the vision for that is within a grade level, there are often multiple sections, like for example, of a 5th grade classroom. With that model, it aims to reduce the number of levels of students within the classroom that the teacher has to serve. Every teacher would have a top group, but specific teachers would have the identified GT students. So again, every teacher has a top group. Specific teachers serve the GT identified students because remember they have to engage in professional learning. There's that expectation for the use of those resources. And again, the goal of that cluster grouping is to reduce the range of levels for that teacher because we know teaching is difficult, right? So that's what gifted and talented cluster grouping does.
So if you had 3 5th grade classes,
Yes.
you would have one of those classes in math would be the higher performing students, and within that grouping would be your GT students? Is that how that would work?
Well, again, it depends on the model, or if they've departmentalized within the classroom. It would be a specific teacher, maybe all 3 teachers teach math, and one of those teachers has the GT
Has
students.
the higher
That
performing.
has the highest group.
Okay.
But the other teachers also have higher groups as well
Within their classroom.
within their classroom, yes.
So how are we making sure then that within, I guess I'm struggling a little bit to try to make sure that you mentioned you try not to have the big range, and that makes sense, because if you have students that are performing at the very end and at the very top of the spectrum, that's hard, particularly something like math, that's hard to teach to all those ranges. But I guess I'm trying to make sure that I understand how we're providing the most challenging thing to this. I don't know, I'm not phrasing it well.
The layering of
I'm just, when we're saying like we're separating them, I just want to make sure like how that experience works for the kids who are the top performers but who are not in the GT.
versus are they being pulled out
Right,
of the class to
how is
another
that
class
working
or to
within
another
like
group
an
or
actual
staying
classroom?
Well, we make the advanced academics resources available to all of the teachers. And so when the students are ready for it, it's typically through that small group instruction. We know that teachers pull small groups. Then they have access to those resources. But as I mentioned earlier, there's also the just-in-time differentiation that can occur during that whole class, the whole instructional block.
And
Yeah.
can you define that a little bit?
Yes, we have actually quest cards and dive deeper cards that teachers can access that with the questions on them that they can right there in the moment pose the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, I don't want to have you make you go back, but on the slides that you showed with the demographic breakdown,
Yes.
starting in 2022, could you tell me again, I missed it, what the yellow line was to represent on each of those categories?
Of course, I can go back to those.
KPIs were great to look at, actually, to see.
So yes, the horizontal line, the orange-yellow, represents the actual enrollment of that group within Frederick County Public Schools. The colored bars show the gifted and talented identified students.
So looking at the Black/African American category, we're saying that the actual number of enrolled children in our school system in that demographic is, I don't know, what's that, 15%?
It says 14%.
Okay, 14, sorry, I don't have my glasses on. So 14%, but in our GT program, it's 10%. 10%, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So what we want to really do is, again, we endeavor to mirror that as closely as possible.
So our goal is to get 14% of our students to have our Black and African American students to represent 14% of our GT students, because there
Mirroring-
are 14% of our enrollment, that's what you're saying.
Mirroring means closer.
Okay,
So it's very difficult to get an exact
Sure.
match to that because of the integrity of the data that we use to identify students. But we want to move closer to the actual representation, yes.
And I think that's the key point. The key point is the integrity of the data. So there are assessments for which a student is identified for gifted and talented. However, through the multiple measures, we want to make sure that we don't miss any student. So it used to be a process whereby parents would nominate or a teacher would nominate. Now what we're saying is it's our responsibility to make sure that we identify any student who has highly able or advanced or gifted skills, and we want to be able to meet their needs.
I think too, that what might be helpful is, I mean, to my understanding, there's a difference between, say, being a high achieving student.
Yes.
That's going home, they're doing their homework, and they're just all those A's. And then the student who is, say, gifted and talented, perhaps in math or in English, but they may be struggling in other areas.
Yes.
Even to the point where there might be an IEP to sort of handle some of these other things that are going on. I think a little more discussion about that. I think for parents in particular, it can be, well, what's gifted and talented? When I was in school, gifted and talented was basically the high achieving students, right? Like, it's hard for them, I think, to differentiate with those two groups of students.
Yes, and Ms. Meunier, that's the importance of the parent outreach sessions that I provide, is we orient the parents to, well, what does that mean? What does that designation mean? But we also make them aware that the gifted and talented student is often asynchronous, cognitively, physically, or socially and emotionally. And so their child may underachieve in one area, but may need to be pushed in other areas as well.
Yeah, and they just may have other needs that once they're meeting them, right, we give them the supports that they need, which this can also help to identify those students who may need those additional supports, correct? Okay. That's good. And then the next KPI slide, I think, had the MML learners, the multilingual
Yes.
language. I don't want to I'm sorry.
no, those are my two primary questions. Thank you very much.
Did you have something?
I was going to say, you actually already touched on the question I had, so we're good.
Okay. So I guess when I'm looking at these KPI studies, one of the things that comes to my mind is the long-term studies about IQ tests and how they were, they were used to sort of differentiate people. And in the very beginning, those tests were just so culturally irrelevant to most people. So when we're talking about, say, our multilingual learners, and we're doing these multiple points of trying to assess where they're at, how often are we doing that in their own language, for one, so that we're not missing them just because there is a language or a cultural difference between them and their teacher and so forth?
Right. So the grade 2 test is language neutral.
Okay.
And it's a group administered, the cognitive, it's not an IQ test, it's a group administered ability test that allows us to see not only the strengths the gifts and talented, the gifted and talented students, but what are the strengths of other students by way of that too. That's very, very important for us to use it as a measure for multiple groups of students. So that's what becomes important, is really making sure that no one measure limits opportunity. So for example, for our multilingual learners, we also look at their progress as they're acquiring language. I will say this, that when we're identifying our multilingual learners, there will often be an elevated COGAT score in one of the domains. And so we're looking for that uptick.
Yeah, it's something
in the
that
data.
To see.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and also then for the parents, right, that have children in the gifted and talented, but then maybe perhaps are also falling into one of these other, whether it's farm or multilingual, students or students with disabilities. Are we, when we do the parent outreach and the parent resources, are we giving parents some resources to take home with them? Like, I love for instance, the persistence piece, right? I mean, even as just a general ed parent, I would love a persistence piece to be able to do that at home with my kids, to kind of encourage that persistence and encouraging taking accountability for their own learning. That's huge, right?
I feel like you set me up very well for that, because during those sessions, we actually give them access to a fully accessible Google folder that has articles written by the National Association for Gifted Children on perfectionism, serving the whole child, right? What it means to be gifted and talented. We do not encourage that they use that label with their children. It's a label that allows us to provide the service, not categorize a student as a human being.
Right, exactly.
And so we do provide them with a wealth of resources that are readily available and helpful links. Supporting the emotional needs of the gifted children is a site that we actually recommend to our parents as well.
Very good. Yeah, I'm very happy. Yeah, I was really curious about this piece of it. I'm concerned as we go into the rest of this year and the next school year, and sort of the budget cuts and funding issues. I know it has come up with some of the teachers who are really servicing those students and making sure they're getting what they need. Just their whole caseload. I think it was Frederick High School that was particularly an outlier, but if they are a partner with you and trying to identify the students in that group, what are we doing to kind of help mitigate some of this workload and so forth, and how often are we able to kind of touch base with everybody, make sure, does that make sense? Touch base with that teacher, or say like at Frederick High School, it was 400 students, I believe. That was an outlier considering, but what was the average, I think, for 30?
Yes,
I
yeah,
think
the
it's
ratio.
The ratio is usually.
And the ratio is excellent, actually.
It is, yeah.
But they really work as a team, and I want to make sure that we kind of touch,
that piece,
that we understand that, because the multilingual education program teacher, the advanced academics, but at the high school level, we have those specific courses that meet the needs of those students, and so through the sessions, through collaboration, through department meetings, they collaborate a lot about the students, and they communicate about the students. So the ML teacher, if they see a student,
They know exactly. That's good.
to talk to.
I guess that's my point. Yeah, because sometimes I can hear, well, we get together, but it may only be a couple times a year.
No, it's very
Versus
intentional.
how often is it? So if there's good open communication and collaboration with everybody.
Our ML team is monitoring data regularly.
Okay, all right. And then what are some of the challenges you're concerned for? I mean, we are going to the budget session, and I know every school has different resources. I think to Ms. Brennan's earlier question about how are we, how many teachers are comfortable and have the professional development for those GT students, and making sure that we're giving them what they need, the families the resources they need. Every school is a little bit different. Every community is a little bit different. I just want to make sure any challenges are something that we should be aware of and know about, especially as we're going into all of this.
Teachers face so much, right? They're getting used to new resources, our HQIMs. I think really our focus in advanced academics, by way of the advanced academics teacher specialists, is to continue to work shoulder to shoulder with those teachers so that they can be very comfortable in using the advanced academics resources, because remember, they're learning new resources at the same time. So again, I keep saying shoulder to shoulder, but it is a very important part of that model so that they feel that they're being supported, but we're also helping them to analyze the data and the growth of those students within the classroom.
And how
It's a
often
partnership.
is resources shifting? I think it was the last CNI, I think we talked about it, I'm trying to remember. So many meetings, so many different times. But in terms of the resource, like the HQIM, right, we have iReady. We've only had iReady for a couple of years, I believe, right? So we're just starting to get data back to really see how that's affecting any change for our students. So same thing with like the resources that you're able to provide for teachers. Is that HQIM changing every 2 to 4 years, or is that pretty consistent in that? Okay.
It's consistent, and when we know we're going to adopt a resource, we start working right away with our CII partners to really align things and let them know what are the hallmarks of GT pedagogy that we plan to weave in to make those advanced academics resources. But it is essential that it's HQIM aligned, because accountability is for everyone.
Absolutely, yeah.
I did want to address your budget question. Last year, the FY25 cycle, prior to you all coming onto the board, there was actually some major reductions in those teacher specialists that serve advanced academics. So that was a casualty of last year's budget.
Okay.
I think it was ultimately about 8 positions.
13.
That were shifted from one person in every middle school to an itinerant model that we have here centrally now, but it was a net reduction in the number of positions. So there was a kind of that big hit happened last year.
Okay.
And so I think Dr. Reinhardt's team and our schools certainly have experienced a new normal this year with that reduction.
I misspoke. I was listening and misspoke. 13 positions were shifted and changed. We have 8 serving the middle schools, and we have 9 serving the elementary schools.
All right.
And just to clarify what they do, they work with the teachers to help them plan and get, their information together and be ready to teach, but they're not classroom-based or leading, or are they leading like interventions themselves at the school level?
So I like that you used intervention, because we consider advanced academics and intervention. So they may push in and they may model what it's like to work with a small group of students, so that the teacher is familiar with how those resources roll out. For example,
training.
Advanced, yes, it is. It's that on the job training and how to lead a discussion, for example. And then during the planning time, obviously we know that teacher planning time is limited, so they work within those structures to provide the support. And then through the data analysis, through unit analysis, understanding what are the resources coming up for them. Yes.
Okay, so helping to break down the requirements, then provide all those kind of back-end supports to the teachers who are in the classroom themselves.
Yes.
But they're not, as a teacher, going in and leading a small group discussion, other than to model the behaviors or to
It's not
train.
required, but if it's
In the tier 2, they do.
Okay.
Tier 2, they're pulling students out when the students are underachieving. They're working with the groups of students on specific skills. Yes.
Yeah, I think some of the folks I've come across too, it's like, you go into one school and perhaps there's been some consistency with the teachers, so they've gotten a really good handle on things, they run smoothly, so they're there to help touch base, whereas another one may have teachers who have not had to do this before, right? And so they're just learning some of the processes and the professional development, and they may be more hands-on in that particular. So it does kind of change my understanding from folks I've talked to a little bit.
It depends on the needs of the schools to which they're
Yeah.
assigned.
Yeah.
So in a lot of schools, as Dr. Reinhardt said, they're in the classroom with the teachers, they're pulling small groups, they're working as a partner in the classroom with
in
the
school,
classroom teacher
they're
in
not-
schools.
Exactly, they're not in a center.
All of these teachers are in schools
Yeah.
and are assigned to schools. And based upon the needs of the school, it could be that if you have beginning teachers, that they're working with the teacher, they're modeling for the teacher, and it very well could be that they are pulling a group in that cluster model to make sure that they have that advanced learning.
From a budget perspective, are those personnel housed in the CNI committee, CNI department budget, or are they housed at the school level budget?
The CII, they're central office itinerant employees.
Okay.
That was a change as of this year
Yeah.
for middle school. from one position, or sometimes more than one position per school assigned to the school, a reduction of 8 positions that became an itinerant model managed by the central office.
But we're saying just from like the numbers on the budget,
would find it as
we've
a-
pulled that out of actual school-based, so we've reduced our school-based costs and increased our
Central office.
central office level cost, is what we're saying, that I mean, just trying to, I'm not,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So so it used to be that they were assigned specifically to schools. Now with the reduction that we've experienced from the past budget cycle, we cannot have one person in a single school. They have to serve multiple schools. And so in order to help to coordinate where the needs are in each of the different schools, on paper, they are assigned to central office. However, in actual reality and practice, they're never in central office, they're in schools.
so that's what I wanted to make sure, because obviously from an overhead perspective, central office is theoretically overhead, but if these are people working in a school, then they're really a school base, and so maybe that's either something we need to, so it's something we need to know when we say these people are not necessarily overhead, and then maybe that's something we need to ask for more information from the
Heather can give you the breakdown of,
business.
like-
Yeah, she can, I know, but I just wanted to make sure that I understand so that I know what I'm asking her for specifically to make sure that I understand. These are people that are coded to central office, but are actually in school base, because we need to know that when we discuss what's overhead and what's
The
not
actual,
overhead.
actual physical office space is in a school.
essential. Yeah, and also we have other schools that we're building, right? We're gonna have School 41 coming on next year. We're gonna be looking forward to a new high school eventually and some other schools. And so, I mean, you guys just had a reduction, but at the same time, those 8 itinerant teachers have to go to then, you're gonna be adding schools to them essentially over the next 2 to 3 years, right?
Yes.
Unless we were able to hire into that department.
Correct.
Yeah, so.
I've got a question for you. At what point, you mentioned about, underperforming or essentially gifted and talented students who are struggling. At what point does a student be removed from the gifted and talented program if they're struggling bad enough that basically they're just where, say, a regular advanced student might be that wouldn't be in the gifted and talented program? What is the determination for removal from the gifted and talented
We
program?
don't ungift a student. What we do is we watch them.
Okay.
And what I say about that is sometimes I have parents who reach out to me and say, my student just has a 504 for ADHD. We want to hold off on services while they just get used to this plan, the model, the plan.
Okay.
But we continue to watch them because we know that students develop at different levels. So
Sure.
they may underachieve just by way of motivation, developmental, but we don't want to take our eye off of them, right? We want to continue to monitor them and provide them with opportunities so that they can show it. We want to continue to support them with the hope that they can demonstrate their full potential. We don't want to let any child slip through the cracks.
I'm glad you brought that out because in many years past, gifted and talented identification was based on academic achievement. However, we know that gifted and talented ability goes well beyond just academic achievement. And so there is memory, you can demonstrate it creativity-wise, there's logic. And so it's more so about how you demonstrate your academic achievement as opposed to what you're automatically coming to the table with. And so that's a very shift that we made in our model years ago, because if we hadn't made that shift, then it would have left several of our students out, regardless of the demographic. But there are students with disabilities who have great spatial abilities, great logic abilities, great memory abilities, that through gifted and talented, they're able to demonstrate their academic achievement differently than sitting down with a test on reading or math.
So they're able to have, because those, especially with enrollment and all these other, there's options for those high achieving students everywhere, right? So we're not leaving any student out. The gifted and talented, we're recognizing that there's there's other needs and resources that might need to be available to them.
Correct, to engage with their idea mates. And for example, I know Dr. Harris mentioned that, but to have, discourse partners that are going to push their thinking as well.
Yeah, and keeping them engaged, because if they can stay engaged in the learning, then they'll stay engaged in school. That's a huge piece.
One complaint I've gotten from parents whose children are receiving, GT services is that it's almost resulted in more work, like higher expectations for performance, which you would expect, as far as of some paper size. One paper might be 5 pages, another paper might be 10. You know what I mean? That we've expanded our expectations of those students, but we haven't actually increased the pace of the classroom, and that their high-achieving students struggle with, we're still doing this unit a whole week later, like I got that 2 days ago. I want to do this other unit, but we're still doing this unit, and they're getting more deeper engagement in that unit, but they feel like they're not moving at a pace that would more suit their abilities. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I'd be curious, this school, the model, I think I encourage parents to reach out to me when they have questions, because our model is not more work, it's different work. It shouldn't be additional assignments.
Well, it wasn't,
Right,
that wasn't
a particular school maybe that's being done differently.
Right, but more just I think more about from the pace level, how fast are we getting through material versus doing different assignments, and I understand, that's, you want to develop that's the advantage of being in a GT level program, is that you're able to develop that really deep understanding of the particular topic, and that's our goal. We're giving you more, but at the same time, the kid, their result, they, I guess, want to see progress, and you know what I mean? And I'm just trying to say, how do we balance the idea that I really want my 7th grader to be doing 10th grade math, and my 7th grader is doing a deeper version of 8th grade math. You know what I mean? I'm trying to
The pace of the advanced math courses is designed to be at that pace at that level.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in math particular, it's rapid.
Okay.
Students who've been identified to take high school algebra in grade 7, and then high school algebra or geometry in grade 8. That means a super accelerated pathway in 5th and 6th grade.
Okay.
In math, we would trust that they're experiencing that acceleration. In the humanities and English and social studies, for example, it is a little bit different.
That's that's really where more of the questions coming up, because it is easier to put a kid in the next higher level math if they're that far advanced, but it's more and that's more where I was saying a paper or something, because we might have met more expectations of this paper, but we're still reading the same book, you know what I mean? We're still and that's where I think.
Subjectiveness to that too, perhaps.
Yes, that's the kind of thing. So is there any way to, is there any way to think about that in a different way?
It's a real advantage of those cluster groups, because what it does is it gives that group of students an academic cohort, a group of academic peers, which allows the teacher maybe to assign I don't want to say extension of pages, but a different twist on an essay prompt.
Right.
And expects that group of students to go deeper. And the sheer fact of students being able to experience that as an academic peer group does provide that kind of enrichment in an English class, for example.
Right.
It's not the same as a rapid pace in math.
Right, and I think that's kind of where it's coming from, and that's, I think, where I'm saying it's perceived as more work, because it is different, and and rightly so, and you want to get that deeper engagement, but it's maybe the delivery is just the perception is that this is I just got a harder assignment as opposed to what I mean.
That if they're given a more complex text to read because they're reading at a higher reading level.
Right.
So it could be perceived as such. But I do thank you for that feedback, and honestly, I encourage parents to reach out to me if they have questions about it, because these things can be unique to a building or to a teacher, and I'd rather really talk through that with a parent to make sure that I'm providing them with the customer service that they.
Oh yeah, no, just trying to get an idea of what our kind of
It's
plans
data
were.
too, so to that idea, we would need the data. So all of the parents who have those, are experiencing that, can, contact us, that would
Well,
be good.
and, obviously, to some degree, the parents aren't completing it themselves, and so they're
Yes.
getting
It's
this,
the perception.
I just got more work, you know what I mean? We're not, like,
We're balancing this out a little bit.
so, just,
Yes, yes.
right.
Yes.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Checking on time, 10:40.
Yes, I know, right?
Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
Colleagues. This one really did, this was a good, presentation that touched on a lot of different things that I think.
Great, thank you.
I appreciate it.
I appreciated the
Yeah, very
opportunity.
good, thank you very much.
All right, I know there's 3 of us, so there's,
Sorry.
Having a third agenda item because of the snow. That's
I know, so this is a little bit longer than an hour than that's what it is.
I was gonna say, wait.
Oh, yeah, environmental literacy and sustainability, all right.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump in.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's save time for all the things that we're going to be thinking of. So this is a new topic for us this year in CNI. And what I'm going to do is, the outcomes. So we're going to talk about our efforts in curriculum and instruction, the current status of environmental literacy, and then achievement partners and next steps. But what I'd like to do is really set the context by giving you the background, okay? So in 23-24, Mobilize Frederick, which is a community partner of ours, they presented to the Board of Education at work session, and the board really requested a plan and some progress updates on FCPS and our sustainability efforts. Now, that is a pretty complex request because there are multiple sides of the house. We have facilities and operations, we have curriculum and instruction, and we have what we're doing with students in environmental literacy. And so what we did was we reconfigured, because there was an environmental literacy committee in our department, but we kind of reconfigured that and re-energized that work. And then we presented an update to the board on the facilities side of the house with Dr. Levo, and then the curriculum side of the house at a December meeting. And so we also formed what we call our sustainability leadership team in the curriculum department. And we have Dawn from facilities who joined that team back in 23-24. And we started to look at the work all together because we have teachers saying, I want a garden in our yard at the school. And there's a lot that goes into that request. And so we really needed it to be a collaborative effort. And we also wanted to meet with all these community partners. There are lots of community partners who have very specific ideas of what they would like to see happen or something that they are advocating for, which is they're passionate about, which is wonderful. But we really wanted to get the scope kind of the whole idea of what all these different partners wanted and how FCPS could either be a part of that work or how we could support that work with them. So we spent the summer meeting with all different partners and learned a lot, and it was exciting to meet these people. And then we also, with the community groups, hosted a Green Career Fair and Green School Interest Meetings. Now, Mobilize Frederick is really a part of that Green School Interest Meeting, and we're going to talk more about that later. And then we started to analyze our school-based programs. What are we doing? Like when we talk about recycling in school, or some schools wanted to compost, or there was lots of different things that schools wanted to do, and we needed to get a handle on what they were doing. So we also wanted to organize our partnerships and with different community groups, and then we were also, this is really exciting, I feel like you should say this. Go ahead. What was that? Colleen Beal.
We were awarded a $40,000 Chesapeake Bay Trust Environmental Education Grant.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, so that was really exciting. And so Colleen and her team really did a lot of that work, so I felt like Colleen needed to say that. And so that's 24-25, that's what's happening now. And there are some future developments that we're going to get into because this is a work in progress, and this is kind of an area where we're really improving, and so things are moving kind of quickly. And so we're going to get into some of that work. I'm going to pass it over to Colleen now.
When we talk about environmental literacy, why do we have it? Why are we talking about it in schools? Well, it's part of COMAR, and from the state, the environmental literacy program has two main goals. They want to be able to enable students to make decisions and take actions that create and maintain an optimal relationship between themselves and the environment, and to preserve and protect the unique natural resources of Maryland. So when you think of environmental literacy, often we think about the Chesapeake Bay. And what do these standards look like? They've evolved over the years. They are embedded in K-12 FCPS curriculum. You think of science as, we get a lot of them, but it is also embedded across different contents too. There are 5 standards: environmental issue investigation and action, human dependence on Earth systems and natural resources, environmental impact of human activity, consequences of environmental change on human health and well-being, individual and collective responses to environmental change. Along with environmental literacy, along with the standards that are embedded into our curriculum, we have some standout student programs. Again, when you think of environmental literacy, often our outdoor school comes to mind. Just as a reminder, outdoor school provides outdoor learning experiences for all 5th and 6th graders using the resources of Frederick County. We also have Envirothon. We had the county Envirothon competition just a few weeks ago, and Catoctin High placed first in that and is going on to represent Frederick County at the Maryland Envirothon. The Envirothon is the largest North American environmental and natural resource conservation academic competition. Climate Youth Institutes. We are starting to have different chapters of Climate Youth Institutes at our high schools. The Climate Youth Institutes educate and certify the next generation of leaders on climate science, environmental issues, and real-world solutions. We have Youth Climate Institutes at Urbana High, Catoctin High, Oakdale High, and Frederick High. And our green teams, so whenever you're going into schools, we have a lot of green teams that are leading the environmental efforts on the school level. And you don't have to be a green school to have a green team, but most green schools do have green teams. I feel like a Venn diagram.
The green school, usually.
And I'm going to pass it to Dawn.
Great. Hi, I'm Dawn Ashbecker. I'm the Sustainability Specialist. And I also want to introduce Ian Moise, who is the Sustainability and Compliance Senior Manager. We're from Facilities, Operations, and Maintenance. And this is a big step forward for us to be at this table and partner, because we are also interested in sustainability district-wide. And so it's good for us to be talking especially about projects that overlap. And these are some examples of topics that also have a facilities component. So composting and food recovery. We, in general, for these programs, we want to make sure that the right people are involved in the conversations and that the initiatives can be sustained over time. So composting, we want to make sure the best practices are involved, since this is in cafeterias, there's food, health, and safety issues, but also on the operations side, often custodians and sometimes our maintenance staff can get pulled into these projects inadvertently, and so we just want them in the discussions at the beginning so they're not given additional work that they are not able to do. Gardens, again, we think gardens are great, and we just want to make sure that they can be maintained over the long term. And then again, recycling. I always talk about recycling as a team sport, so it's not just custodians, it's not just teachers, but people need to be working together. And so it's great for us because we are now connected with the green teams, and we can talk together about what will help these programs to actually last.
We wanted to talk and highlight a few of our achievements, partnership, development, and next steps. So with our achievements, a lot of the work that we've done and the progress we've made has really been with our partnership with Mobilize Frederick. So we just wanted to publicly thank them because they have really helped us continue our progress. And in the fall, we had several of our teachers and students recognized by Frederick County Sustainability Awards. And I mentioned how we are growing Climate Institute chapters. And we also have been, not only are we seeking out grants, but we are also supporting community grants. For example, Mobilize Frederick, we write letters of support for them, and also with the Youth Climate Institute, because there's an organization in Howard County that's trying to help support that, and we have been supporting them in their pursuing grants. And Dr. Gall has already talked about our sustainability leadership team, which I am happy to be part of. Our green schools, you may have seen that we just added 6 more green schools. On Earth Day it was announced, very fitting, and we renewed 2. And also when we're talking about Frederick County as a whole, Frederick County now has 2 new green centers. They're not Frederick County Public Schools, but Mobilize Frederick, which I think is so unique. They are a green center, as well as Thorpwood. Central office recycling efforts have been recently reinvigorated. So when you're walking around, you might see a little more signage, and there has been a resurgence with our recycling efforts here at Central Office. And I already mentioned a little bit about the Chesapeake Bay Foundation grant, which we just received, and we are starting to move on that a little bit. The main goals of that grant is to develop the FCPS Sustainability Plan for Curriculum and Instruction, grow the capacity of our FCPS pre-K to 12 teachers, and strengthen our partnerships. And along with partnerships.
Yes, so as we keep talking about, we can't really do sustainability without partnerships. And we're focused both internally, building those partnerships, as well as externally. And there's numerous community groups that do work, and they also want to connect with the schools. And so we wanted to meet with the partners so that there's a process, and there's a consistency, and there's equal access, basically, so that everybody's aware. And also so community groups know how they have a process to connect. And then in addition, as we were talking about the programs, we on the facility side are also working on standard procedures so that it's more clear to schools that are interested what do they need to do for things like gardens, composting, recycling, and food recovery. And fortunately, that is also a part of the grant. So we'll continue to work on all of that.
And along with next steps, where do we go from here? We want to continue to increase the number of green schools. We are looking at different ways to continue to spread the wealth of environmental literacy. And we're looking at CTE and their agribusiness pathways. And we've just added a CTE rep onto our internal environmental literacy curriculum team, which meets monthly. And as we've talked about, we're continuing to collaborate with Frederick County Government Division of Solid Waste and Recycling to continue to enhance our recycling efforts with the goal of recycling consistently throughout our system.
All right.
I'm excited.
I was going to say, I feel like there were questions being written down.
There's like quick little notes to add into that and to remind myself. But also, I was happy to hear facilities being here too, because I actually had a conversation with someone at a couple other schools, one who has successfully was able to get the Green School certification. That was at Butterfly Ridge, and another one that is working on that. And I think the conversation with facilities for them was difficult because they come with a great idea, right? And then they're like, no, but wait, and all of these questions. So my question to them was, facilities should be part of the curriculum instruction conversation, so I'm very happy to see you here. And also like nutrition for the School Health Council. You talk about like the Lunch to Landfills program, recycling, how we, all of that, having nutrition as a part of that conversation too could be very, very helpful as well. They also have their own standards that they have to meet, right? And they know that better than we do, so they, and also having those liaisons meet as part of the School Health Council in a sense, so that we're actually looking at the whole child, whole school, and whole community, right? And how in Frederick County, we are very lucky to have, I was at the Catoctin Mountain Orchard and the apples and so forth, but we've also just lost some USDA grants, and how are we going to continue the partnership with the loss of funding that they may have had as well, right? Sustainability efforts for our farmers so they can continue to farm, but so they can also continue to provide fresh food and stuff, and we continue these sustainability efforts. So I was very happy also to see you here for all that. When it comes to the challenges and obstacles that you guys see when you have conversations with schools that want to go forward with these sorts of things, I mean, what comes to my mind, like the garden beds, right? Making sure that they're removable or they can be used as something else, not something that then has to be maintained by the maintenance. a person who may come to maintain the fields, do the mowing, do all of that. They may be, also have more than one school, is my understanding, right? So we have to be cognizant and mindful of how many schools they may have to go around to take care of things. Can you just speak to that piece a little bit for people who might be listening, thinking about how do I do this here? But these are the questions they have about facilities and how to have those partnerships with facilities.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. No, you can start.
No,
and then
okay, I'll start and then. This is often, projects are often kind of a passion project for a particular teacher.
Yeah.
And so they feel very strongly about something and they want to go ahead and get it moving and get it started. And we're really looking at the community, the school as a whole community.
Yeah.
How can this be something that is the collective responsibility of multiple teachers, multiple staff, but also students, right? We want to teach our students through this. And beyond, exactly, sustainable beyond that teacher. And so we just want to make sure that we're thinking about the big picture that way. And so that we have to partner with facilities to do that. But we also have to think forward down the road, 2, 3, 4 years from now. Who will be maintaining that? Who will be doing that? Because our students graduate, they move on to the next level. And so we want to make sure that the projects we put into place are sustainable.
And the parent volunteers are oftentimes also helping out with those garden plants and so
Well,
forth.
they don't anymore.
No, they're going
To make sure that.
make it a part of
Yeah.
the science curriculum.
Because it's
So
important.
then it's, yes, right? Like kind of, and I think you touched on that a lot too, is doing that.
Add something to that, don't you?
Yeah, I think, so again, we're working on procedures because clearly it would be helpful if people know up front what to do.
Yeah. And then you're not feeling like you're having to say no.
Right.
Puts you in a different position where you're a more collaborative partner versus someone that's like a gatekeeper. Yeah.
Yeah, that we want to help get to yes as opposed to just be on the no side of the table. And I will say, I mean, I think Dr. Gall noted there are a lot of concerns to consider. So for example, garden, you know, there's the person who is mowing. Leaving room for the mower, for example, may not be the thing that somebody's thinking about, or they may be like, oh, we'll put it at this angle, but not realize.
Utility lines.
Yes.
Right?
Right, so we do want to make sure that a garden is not placed on top of a sewer line, for example, in the case that the sewer line needs repairs and they have to dig it up.
Yes.
So, so we have started some procedures for gardens very recently, and we are piloting them a little bit right now, and then we'll roll them out more broadly. But it lists out the things that we're concerned about and the questions that we have so that people know.
Oh, that's perfect. I mean, and having that available for the folks that are trying to do that for their schools, and they don't feel like they have to go around FCPS, that actually we're a partner with them in getting that done. And then in building that into the curriculum for science and social studies, I wish we had a community liaison at every school. Because there's not a budget that's separate for this, right? There's not like a separate budget item for environmental literacy. It's the grants that we're able to do with community partnerships. That's how we get to green schools, correct? Or am I just thinking of
Embedded in the curriculum.
Yeah, yeah. So, but let's see. Anybody else before I? 'Cause
Yeah, I got a
yeah.
couple So Youth Climate Institute, what organization actually backs that, funds that, runs that in the school system? Is that something that FCPS cooked up, or is that something that a community organization's brought into the school? What is that?
It started with Howard County Conservancy, and they've had grassroots kind of spreading across the state and the country with Youth Climate Institute.
Okay.
And those are chapters at high schools, right?
Just like any other club, any other
Yes.
regular
Like any other
clubs.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then the other question I had, mentioning about recycling, because I can tell you from experience in watching janitors at the schools, do we, other than cardboard, we don't actually have a dumpster for recycling at the schools, do we?
We actually do have a dumpster, so usually there's at least 2 dumpsters at every school, sometimes more, but one is for recycling. The challenge is it looks very similar to the one that is trash, but on it, it does have markings that say this is recycling and it's single stream, and so we do recycle cardboard, paper. We have the ability to recycle cardboard, paper, plastic, glass, metal. The challenge is getting everybody trained and working together so that only those things are put in recycling bins, because the custodians have been directed, and it's part of their procedure, to empty recycling bins. It's not part of their procedure, though, to take out contaminated
Correct.
items. But every school has that ability to.
Okay. And are we as a school system paying extra for dumpsters to recycle, or is Frederick County government providing those dumpsters, considering Frederick County has spearheaded a recycling program for years?
So we pay for that as part of our solid waste contract. It includes trash and recycling.
So we're paying extra to recycle?
Yeah, would recycling even be a separate piece of that contract? I mean, folks don't.
They typically are.
Just
And a commercial
Okay. All right.
facility.
It's difficult with recycling because you go to the Frederick Fair, you do the little group project, you go and you see like, oh, the clamshell, my strawberries came in. I can't actually put into recycling, even though it has a little recycling symbol, right? Sometimes
I
I'm
know, our
surprised by the
recycling
things,
people always
yeah.
send nasty grams out about that all the time.
So, are we, when our recycling is being picked up, I guess, if people are putting so much effort into it, right, into making sure it's sorted and cleaned, because a lot of things do have to be cleaned before they be put into there, to then be recycled at the recycling plant. I think Nancy actually used to work for a recycling company or something along these lines. Nancy Allen and I had a whole conversation about this. The glass was easier because they can burn this down. It didn't have to be cleaned, right? They can burn it down. It could become another material. With other things like plastics, it's a little more difficult in a sense. But I guess we don't really have much control. Once they pick that up, whether they turn that into trash or they actually turn that into recycling, right? It's just...
Right, I mean, hopefully the truck is.
Hopefully that's not
the truck that's picking up the recycling, and as long as it's not overly contaminated, it will go to the recycling.
Have we ever audited to see how much percentage of our recycling actually gets recycled versus just being thrown to the dump? Because quite frankly, if most of it's going to the landfill to begin with, we're wasting money recycling.
Right.
Like, I mean, I can tell you, 9 times out of 10, the recycling's looked at, yep, there's trash, and the trash it goes. I mean, there really, I think that's a very wasteful thing if we don't have an actual audit to know whether or not our recycling's really being recycled. Might as well not do it.
Yeah, so first of all, we are partnering with, while we pay for our recycling, we are partnering with Frederick County Solid Waste and Recycling, so we can work together and
improve,
have the best practices and improve. So there is an audit that Frederick County does, because the recycling is taken to the transfer station, so,
Right.
and then it gets shipped to the processing recycling plant. There they do an audit, I think, I don't know how frequently, but fairly frequently is my understanding, to see how much of it is contamination. And Frederick County's is the county as a whole has been around 10%. So basically it's going to the plant, it's being processed, and what can be recycled is recycled, and what is contamination is taken out.
Well, if it's only 10%, I mean, that's actually better than I was expecting, so.
It's 10% or 10%. It's only 10% is getting recycled.
Yeah.
Which way is that going?
10% contamination.
10% contamination. Okay, so 90%.
Yeah, that's better than I was expecting, actually.
That's the latest number that I heard, so again, if we can
Right, that's
not
not-
to get a more specific.
How much are we paying to recycle in FCPS?
Is that maybe a Heather Clayball question, or?
I'd have to get back to you on the exact number.
I'll email Heather, that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. And I mean, this is also where having the green team and a green school helps, because then you have partners with the students, the teachers, and parent volunteers and so forth to help kind of maintain. Like at lunch, I know we have parent volunteers that come in to help make sure that the kids are putting things in the right bin, things going in the right place. We partner with Lunch to Landfills, different things of that nature, and I think that becomes more important. And then one of the things I have come across is just the buy-in from the principal standpoint, so that they can wrap their head around, because again, this is something that's going to be, it's on someone's agenda, right? They have to take time from other things perhaps to make sure that they can do this, and I'm getting them to understand how it can be done, right? Having a very clean system. I think that's one of the things you said you were working on, like so everybody understands from the get-go what facilities can and cannot do, what questions they should ask before they get tied to an idea too quickly. But how are we working with state principals to get that buy-in and see?
We collaborate with instructional directors on a regular basis, but we also communicate with principals on a regular basis, and so they want to do what's best for their community and for their
Absolutely.
students. That's why they're,
It's
in
just
that
really just
position.
balance
So
of time and everything else.
the clearer we can be with our communication and our processes, and the clearer that we can say this is how these things happen, then it helps them do their job. And so that's really that's why we formed this leadership team. That's why we're working with facilities so that we can have good, consistent messaging. We're all saying the same thing, and we all agree on the processes. And so that's why I said we're kind of jumping midstream in the work, because
Right,
that's
exactly, yeah.
also our future work.
Yeah, and I think a little bit too, looking at what those requirements are to become a green school, and if there's anything we need to kind of, relook at, realign, so that it is a little bit easier, a little more streamlined.
Well, and our community partners are helping us do that as well.
Yeah, and it was wonderful at the Butterfly Ridge Arbor Day. I mean, they had Rupert's Landscaping, they had the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. There's a lot of different community partners to really help make sure that they could get the trees planted there, help with their garden. There's also a University of Maryland liaison, who then I saw again at the school health council. So that was why I was thinking, wow, this should be at least someone from sustainability as a part of that.
All connected.
Yeah, because it is all connected, and if we're looking at the same community partners too, for that matter, it's kind of pull all that communication together, I think would be good too, as well. FFA, I know you talked about, who was it?
CTE.
Yeah, the agribusiness and the agribusiness, and we have such a strong FFA here, and Granges. Are they a part of this communication as well? And
I was just at an FFA event at Linganore last night.
Okay.
And actually sat with the Secretary of Agriculture with the state of Maryland, and it was a wonderful conversation, and it was a wonderful award ceremony. And I was with Dr. Pearl, who's the supervisor of CTE, and that's why we have a CTE partner on our leadership team, so that we can connect all of that work. And so that is happening. That is absolutely happening, where we can align. But that's those students were just the leadership that they exhibited and everything that they were discussing and the awards, they do great work. And so that's why we felt it was important to partner with our CTE team in this leadership work.
anything else, you guys? I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
See?
What is social studies? All right.
Okay, so next up is social studies and student leadership. I wanted to point out a couple things as she comes to the table.
Yes, hi guys.
One of our curriculum specialists is unable to be here, so Dr. Colleen Bernard is going to run the show today, both elementary and secondary. Also wanted to point out that Dr. Bernard supervises all things student leadership. So all of our student government associations, all of our processes for student member of the board elections, all of that falls under curriculum instruction led by Dr. Bernard. So we're going to cover that in today's presentation as well. So Dr. Bernard, take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I am really excited to really share about our social studies program and our student leadership programs in Sacramento Public Schools. First, I just want to turn our attention to our presentation outcomes. We'll look at the totality of our social studies program across elementary and secondary when it comes to curriculum instruction and the assessment of the program, as well as the professional learning that we bring to support our students in implementing our program and support directly to the schools that we provide. Mr. Murphy talked about our robust student programs. They're not possible without a lot of partnerships from the community, so I'll be discussing those partnerships and those programs, and then the jewel of the social studies program, which is CASC, Student Government Program. So first we'll turn our attention to elementary. Before I dive in, I just want to give you an overview of what curriculum is in social studies. It comes from the state. The state has determined there are 6 standards for social studies. The first 5 of those standards are content-based standards, and they represent individual social sciences. Civics would be political science. We have economics, geography, history, and the nation, peoples of the nations of the world. That's the anthropology component of social science. That all interweaves to become what we refer to in America as social studies. And then the expression of that through our disciplinary literacy in skills and processes in the social studies. So looking at our elementary program, we're required to align both elementary and secondary to the state frameworks. The state develops those frameworks, releases them to the LEAs, then we develop our local curriculum in alignment with the state frameworks. Our K-3 elementary program focuses on that rudimentary foundational knowledge that students need to build within those social sciences individually, And then our 4-5 program integrates it all through the lens of history in the totality of American history from the founding to the present in those 2 grade levels. We also intertwine, it's important for us to note, we intertwine with financial and environmental literacy as part of our standards, especially when we're focusing on economics. That's where that financial literacy comes in. And in the geography components of what we teach, that's where our environmental literacy will come into our elementary program. Moving forward in the elementary program, we're really obviously focusing on literacy as a key component. Social studies provides many, many opportunities for reading, writing, and speaking within the discipline, and building of prior knowledge that students can then bring into the ELA space and understanding informational texts. Optimization of time in the elementary schedule, always crucially important, and being able to do more integrative processes between ELA and social studies and other content areas across the core. Scaffolding for learners, that then allows us to scaffold for learners their learning when we can help them make those connections interdisciplinary across all disciplines. And then we certainly want to ensure the accessibility of our curriculum by universally designing for all learners, ensuring that all students have access to the curriculum through through resources that are developed to provide this support. I'm going to turn our attention to our secondary program. So in the secondary program, we take those same 6 standards from the state, and now we're lensing those through specific content areas. And so in our secondary program, we have 6 required core courses from 6th grade to 11th grade. There's no required 12th grade course. We have robust options in electives. 6th through 8th, 6th and 7th, currently is world history and then into early American history in 8th grade. The state has released new frameworks in 6th and 7th grade, and they have revamped that curricula to dovetail off of the concepts from elementary school and pulling them into a geography-lensed world history case study approach to the content for 6th and 7th grade. So they will be using the geographic understandings, things like movement of goods and people, what characteristics of place, what makes this place special, what makes it different from other places, how is it similar, and regions of the world. And then they'll be taking world history case studies and tracing those themes across history. So how have humans interacted with their environment from the beginning of time to now, and looking at very specific case studies. So you'll see that in that new framework from the state in our curriculum. The timeline for this, we'd like to roll out 6th grade in 2026, 7th grade in 2027. Having that two-year rollout allows the students who are currently in our pipeline to complete that course of study that we've already mapped out from them from 6th to 11th grade. And then with the new one, as our kiddos come into 6th grade, they will then access the new 6th grade curriculum, which will roll into the new 7th grade curriculum on through the 11th grade as they exit the social studies program. Other course alignment and revisions, we're streamlining our local essential curriculum and aligning to all state frameworks. So we want to ensure that our local, and we do this repeatedly every few years, are we fully aligned with the state? We review, we refresh, we revise if we see that there are disparities between us and the state. So that's our process. In 2024, curriculum development, our focus was very intentional on the 6th and 7th grade, and that will continue this year and next year. But at the same time, we also are continually to improve and tweak our processes in the entirety of our core program. And then we also have this elective piece that we bring on board when it comes to our high school program. I'm going to speak to that in just a second here. In high school, we have 3 required courses. Now, if you came through Frederick County Public Schools a number of years ago, this was not the order that you took those courses. This is now our current sequence. So we build out of middle school in American Studies 1, which takes students from the founding, actually from exploration really, through Industrial Revolution. We start with Era of Reform in American Studies 2 in 9th grade and come up to the present. And as we know, part of the challenge is every day is a new day for us to study in our social studies classes. From there, students get to consolidate their learning of American history through the lens of American government in 10th grade, and then before we launch them out into the world, we bring them into the space of modern world history, which is from about 1750. Okay? And that dovetails off on our current content in elementary school, or I'm sorry, middle school as well. We have multiple options for our students. We are the only content area that does offer an advanced placement option for 9th graders. In advanced placement United States history, it's a year-long class, and we specially designed it in order to support those learners. And I'm going to give credit to Mr. Hines, who's here with me today. He was an advanced placement U.S. history teacher for 11th graders when the course was in 11th grade, and he was instrumental in helping us make our 9th grade program the success that it is. We offer standard honors level, and we also offer dual enrollment classes in the social studies to parallel with our programs. Next, of course, it's the build out of the 6th and 7th. It's not only building the actual instructional, building the essential curriculum, the instructional materials, it's also providing the support for our teachers to implement. The shift from world history to a geography lens, there's going to be robust professional learning provided for students, for our teachers, and we've already begun that. Academic and literacy focus, really ensuring that our social studies program is academically intensive, that we're challenging our students and their understanding, and using reading and writing in the classroom every day, and using complex texts from a variety of levels and sources in order to allow our students to construct their understanding and construct arguments based on reasoned judgment. High quality instructional materials, this is coming from the state. We don't have our HQIM yet in social studies. It is in development, and right now we've gone through a series of iterations where supervisors have had an opportunity, from across the state have had an opportunity to provide feedback to MSDE about what we want to see in that rubric, and we expect that rubric to be released to us soon, hopefully in the next month or two, but I can't speak authoritatively exactly what the release time is for MSD on that. And that will certainly guide us as we continue to improve our program and select our instructional materials for use. And then, of course, the revisions to curriculum resources, that continual revise, refresh, renew that we go through. And we are doing that specifically with our electives as well. We offer more than 20 electives in the social studies, high school social studies program. That's a lot of curriculum, and so we've created a cycle of looking at each of those and doing revisions to them and bringing them forward over a cycle of a number of years. When it comes to assessment, social studies is assessed in 2 grade levels, 2 content areas. So the early American history is assessed in 8th grade, and that's MCAP 8th grade American Studies. And then government has always been assessed since, I want to say, about 2004, which is when I became a high school social studies teacher. And with a few exceptions, there were some years where the government, they went back and forth about the government assessment. Government assessment used to be the high school assessment that you had to pass in order to graduate. All of those assessments were shifted to MCAP, and government is one of the end of course assessments. You no longer have to pass it to graduate, you must participate in it, and as of this year's test administration, it is 20% of the overall course grade. So term 1 and term 2 are calculated together to get that grade, and then the end of course assessment comes in as 20% of the overall course grade. So this was our first year where that was the case. As far as benchmarks are concerned, so we have developed 2 benchmarks for every core course that mirror they're called EBAs, evidence-based argument sets, on the MCAP. And those evidence-based argument sets are constructed with a compelling question and a series of documents for students to be able to analyze the documents for credibility and corroborative value, and then to determine, based on those documents and how they want to use those documents, what is their argument to answer the compelling question. And the documents are, are from both sides, plus usually a neutral viewpoint, and we do the same with our benchmarking programs. We do that for our students. And so, like I said, we have 2 per grade level. There is, when it comes to government, because of the semesterization and because of the MCAP testing impinging on what could be our second testing window for a benchmark. The second benchmark in that course is optional. And then we get to modern world history. The benchmarks look a little bit different because we evolved them. The whole point of these EBAs, and you might be familiar with document-based questions, DBQs, it's very similar construction and similar output. But the idea of a DBQ is basically, we did the research for you, now write the research paper. Right. So when we get to modern world history, after we have done the state assessment, in modern world history, we want our students to go further and do some research, analyze sources on their own of a topic of their choice, and then construct their outline of how they would represent that material. And so those are the benchmarks. It's an annotated bibliography and the assessment of their credibility and corroborative value of their sources and how they would construct that.
And that's in 11th grade?
That's 11th grade. So that's our terminal course, our terminal grade level. And so those are. Now, when it comes to professional learning and school support, we provide we have a couple of opportunities where we can provide direct support. It's job-embedded opportunities, so New Hire Symposium for both elementary and the secondary program. We have opportunities to provide curriculum support there. On the elementary side, we get 2 curriculum days, and on the elementary side, some time is taken in one of those days to provide new hires with familiarity of the elementary social studies program. And then on the secondary side, we have 2 dedicated days with our new hires where Mr. Hines and I and our master teacher for social studies takes them through the social studies curriculum. Here are the resources. What does high quality instruction look like? And all of those principles of practice in the social sciences. We also provide support. On the elementary side, we have a curriculum day at the beginning of the school year. So on the elementary side, at the elementary curriculum day, information is provided to be shared with teachers about curriculum updates, changes, and new supports for the instructional program. And then on the secondary side, we have a full day with all of our social studies teachers who bring them together and robust professional learning when it comes to pedagogical practices as well as building their content efficacy, like, for example, in geography. We need to build that content efficacy so they're able to deliver that instruction. We also provide support on the secondary side through the ALP process at our schools, where Mr. Hines and I will go out and provide direct support with teams, department chairs, departments, support to schools that reach out to us as well. And then on the elementary, on both elementary and secondary, support to TSI schools in the development of their SIP plans and execution of those plans. In addition, on the secondary side, something that's not job embedded and you may have seen is this year we offered a special speaker series and we brought in special speakers. Our first was Don Cook, who was the youngest member of the State Department who was held hostage in Iran in 1979, and he shared his experiences. Dr. Denny, who is an expert on NATO and European affairs at the U.S. Army War College, came in and discussed the complexities of those things. And then most recently, Ms. Dee Jenkins from ARCH, one of our great partners for our social studies program, did a walking tour of local Black and African American history in Frederick for our teachers. My favorite part. Student programs and partnerships. I'm going to jump to History B here because that's our one leverage into elementary school right now. So History Beat is sponsored by the Frederick News Post. And if I recall correctly, we had 18 elementary schools participate last year, and 21 elementary schools are going to participate this year. That's going to be held at the end of, I'm sorry, I have to go back to that one. What's in my notes? I want to say it's the end of May. It's the end of May 29th at Hood College. And then starting at the top, Civics and Law Academy, we provide Civics and Law Academy. It's
That's great.
a little bit more than a half a day program that is conducted in association with the Bar Association of Frederick County. The bar is incredibly supportive of our program, of our secondary social studies program. They support civics and law. They help us get the speakers. We have Model UN sessions, we have mock trial sessions. I'll get to Model UN in a minute. We have mock trial sessions. We have Chief Lando and a group of folks in the legal field come in and talk about law enforcement and careers in law enforcement. It's a really robust program that's offered for 8th graders through 12th graders. For
An elective?
It is an extracurricular activity.
Okay.
So it happens on a Saturday in November, usually at Frederick High School.
Thank you.
Next, I'll jump down to the Maryland General Assembly PAGE program. This is a statewide program where we can send up to 5, we can select for our county up to 5 pages and 1 alternate to send to the state that then work with our representatives 2 weeks a year supporting that, and that is for seniors only. And every school in the county has the opportunity to select a page at the school level, send them to the county selection. All of those teachers and advisors of the school program then participate in that countywide selection. Mock trial. Mock trial is run by the Maryland Bar Association and the My Law organization. It's run at the state level. It's a competitive program. We have local competitions, then circuit competitions, regional, states, and actually now our teams last year went on, a team from Maryland went on to the national mock trial competition. We get a case book from My Law every year, and we run our mock trial program, again, in partnership with with our local judiciary, and the Frederick County Sheriff's Office helps support that tremendously and provide a security program. That program actually happens at the Frederick County Courthouse. Our students are in courtrooms, arguing their case in front of judges who are usually local attorneys. It's a fantastic program. And also, shout out to the Frederick Bar Association. In March, we had our very first ever mock trial awards program, and Bar Association helped support that program. Model United Nations. Model United Nations goes back more than 2 decades now in Frederick County. It started out with a very small group, partnering with Hood College. We still have the same professor at Hood College that supports us, Dr. Eager. She's now moved up in the Hood hierarchy, but she supports us, as does Hood, with content, background briefs for our Model United Nations program. We have a robust program here in Frederick County, but this program is open to anybody in the region who wants to come. So we've had Frederick County teachers go other places and bring their kids as well, and their friends. We have schools from Loudoun County, we've had schools from Pennsylvania, the district, and across the state participate. In our last Model United Nations, we had over 400 students register to participate in that program. I also want to recognize Educational Systems Federal Credit Union, who came in a couple of years ago to help support our program and sponsor our awards and our lunch that day. On that day. National History Day program is run by the Maryland Humanities Council at the state level, and they then provide support to our local district in providing the National History Day program. A national theme is set, and then the competition started at the local level. Our local partner with that is Rose Hill Manor, and Amanda Venable who's the manager of the museum over there. She runs our program centrally. We work with her for that program, and that is a program for both middle and high school. And then finally, our Veterans Day programming. Veterans Day programming is coordinated with my team. So we help provide the Central Veterans Day Program, if you've ever seen that here, as well as the Veteran and Education Service Award. That's coordinated by our team as well, and our sponsor for that award is Oh, and there was one thing, I'm going to jump back here because it just happened last week on May 1st. I would be remiss in not talking about Law Day. We have Law Day every year that we work with the Maryland and Frederick County Judiciary to provide for our students, and we took over 100 students from different schools across the county to the courthouse last Thursday, so they could interact with judges, they could watch trials, ask questions of prosecutors and defense attorneys, bailiffs. The Sheriff's Department was there. It was a very, very robust educational program. It's one of our favorites for the year. Frederick County Association of Student Councils. There we go. This is the last one. Frederick County Association of Student Councils is our premier student leadership program in FCPS. It is an opportunity for all middle and high school students, including our charter school, classical charter school this year had really good participation in our program. We offer 4 general assemblies a year where representatives from every school can be sent to the General Assembly. We do leadership, and the General Assemblies are run by the Executive Board that is elected by the students. Right? And that executive board also includes a middle school representative. So it is representative of the secondary program in Frederick County Public Schools and the students in that program, most importantly. We do offer 1 middle school leadership assembly. We usually do it in September to get them before the first General Assembly, just to get our middle schoolers up to speed on parliamentary procedure and things like that. That's what we work on in that program. And then we also offer the Superintendent's Cup, which Middletown Middle School was the recipient of this year, with more than 130,000 points accumulated. It's not just about raising money, it's about raising awareness. This year was lots of things in a backpack. And so they did everything from nutritional awareness and understanding how sleep impacts your health and things like that, to actually having fundraisers and collecting and packing for blessings. And so that is every year the executive board chooses, the students choose what the charity is going to be. So it does rotate from year to year. Student member of the board is also, that election process is also run through by our team, and so everything from putting the applications out to the electoral process. We do have an electoral college system for electing a student member of the board. It's based on the popular vote at each school. Each school then has that same number of representatives that they can send to the General Assembly, that they can send to the Maryland Association of Student Councils meetings. That's the number of electoral votes each school has, and it's based on student population. And so the student member of the board-elect, that is, that vote is taken by the Electoral College at the 3rd General Assembly, which usually happens in early February, and that certifies the election of the next year's student member.
Learn about the electoral process.
All right. I invite your questions.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh my gosh, I think my first one actually came from back in the beginning. We were talking about nations of the world as an anthropology piece.
Yes.
And only because just my background in anthropology and archaeology and working at the National Battlefield. So when I think nations of the world, like that's one, like a national identity is just one piece of that cultural perspective. Yeah.
So I just want to qualify that. Yes. The part that's left off there should be peoples and the nations of the world.
There we go. Okay.
That's what you're.
Yeah.
It was left off that string.
Yeah, and I think the geography piece that you're introducing, I remember walking to one of the elementary schools, and they were really using geography to explain just movement of people, right, and migration and so forth. And I think really from that cultural perspective, that's really helpful to take that, because then it also builds those blocks of why are we. Why did Germany come to be here? Why does Northern Italy have their road signs of both German and Italian? What's happening with the Alsace region? One day they're German, one day they're French. They say, whatever, drink some recent nights. Basically what it comes down to. But, and in anthropology we talk about, geography and how it affects, say, the food culture, how, the building of the states, all of that stuff. So I'm curious in terms of like how your teachers are reacting to kind of using that paradigm as just a different way to deliver that information, through geography instead of maybe through their traditional sort of curriculum.
Okay, so I just want to unpack that
Yeah,
question just a little bit. So are we talking specifically about the shift in the 6th and 7th grade courses, or the totality of the program and how we're...
Totality, because eventually they're going to all, it's going to all filter through, right?
Okay, so in the younger years, K-3, things are really modularized because we're building that very foundational knowledge, like what are societies, what are communities, what are cultures, right? And from the very most basic level, and then that amplifies out, right, as students move through our program, and we pull in and overlay and intertwine all of the social sciences together, and usually through the lens of history. By the time we get to 8th grade, we're kind of history, political science, which requires the history knowledge, and then back to history. So it's intertwined, and that's the beauty of social science. You go to other countries and they don't teach social studies, they teach geography, history. We teach social studies in America, which allows us to intertwine all of these things. We are, a pluralistic nations in the world, and allows us to intertwine all of that into how does where someone lives and the physical environment impact how they live. What is where, why there, why care? Those are the 3 questions of geography, but those permeate all of those other social sciences. What do the economic activities and human systems look like there? What do the government systems look like there? How does environment influence government systems? How do government systems influence the environment? And it all comes together and coalesces in each of our courses.
And is there an element that includes sort of that media system, information system? We don't have 3 channels on a little YouTube anymore, right? It's kind of, our information comes from so many places, and just from my experience with family in Tennessee, and that here there's such a different information system in different places, right? And how that informs just the choices and what people think they have choices, right?
So certainly. The focus of the social studies program, when it comes to skills and processes, is assessing sources for their credibility and corroborative value. In order to do that, we have to have multiple sources across multiple perspectives. There's a foundational rudimentary body of knowledge that we have to provide to students before they can access these sources. We provide that rudimentary foundation body of knowledge as our standards require, and then have our students express that through an understanding of the interpretation of those sources and constructing their arguments about a compelling question, and we've got lots of those, and bringing those sources to provide reasoned judgment and evidence to support their positions.
So it's not just 11th grade where they're really starting to develop that research project. Okay. It kind of sounded a little bit like that in the presentation. I was like, I got to revisit that.
Let me clarify, absolutely. This is an integral part of the totality of our social studies program out of elementary school through 11th grade.
That information literacy, especially these days where they can get on their phone, on a tablet, they have to be able to learn how to,
Right. We want our students to be able to be informed, empowered, and participatory members of a democratic society. And in order to do that, they have to be educated and have to be able to ascertain
good information.
Good information. Is this credible? How do I know it's credible? Can I corroborate the information from source A, B, and C? How do I do that? Those are all the skills and the processes that we focus on in social studies.
Did you have any questions?
Yeah,
Okay.
so first off, I just want to correct you, we're a republic, not a democracy.
Yes, we are a democratic republic, sir.
Yes, so I think that that's very important to make sure our students are aware of that we are a republic. Secondly, I'm very concerned as a board member because I continue to hear from both parents as well as students a major lack in education and civics in our Constitution and our founding documents in FCPS. Very concerning. From what you've explained, it sounds like those type of subjects aren't even really broached until at least 4th or 5th grade, maybe middle school. That's a problem. That's a major, major problem. And what does the social studies department plan to do about that?
Well, thank you for that question. So to start with the elementary program. So in elementary school, going back to those K through 3, those foundational years, the basic concepts of civics and government, that is where those concepts are introduced. And by 3rd grade, the U.S. Constitution's introduced in our curriculum. In 2nd grade, we're looking at democratic versus authoritarian governments, different types of governments. But if you trace it all the way back to K1, we're looking at concepts of what is freedom, equality, rules, and why we have them and who makes them. Those are those very foundational concepts that we then spiral and build upon through our whole program. We come back to the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution, Articles of Confederation first, obviously, or Declaration of Articles, Constitution, in 4th grade. And that's where those conceptions, and I'm glad that you brought up the democracy piece, because it is. We are a democratic republic, and there is a difference. There is a difference between, and that's why that was to guard against the tyranny of the majority.
Correct.
Right? And those concepts would be a little complex to introduce as such in K1 through 3, but in order to understand them in 4 and 5, where we do introduce them, we have to break them down into their component parts, spiral them all the way back, and start with those foundational pieces of freedom, liberty, justice, and spiral them up. Then, 4th and 5th, we're looking at the Constitution never goes away. It is every single day, right? And so that is through the totality of our program. So when we get into 5th grade, and we're looking at kind of, we come back to that founding period and pull it. It's like we're always pulling forward, right? So here's the civic standard in 5th grade. This is what they should already have. Let's make sure they've got it. And then what are we going to build on top of that? And then we look at constitutional crises like the Civil War. And then how does the Constitution expand? And how is it flexible? We've got the expansion of amendments during Civil War 13, 14, 15. That's where those are introduced. But again, that concept of amending the document goes back 2 years. Right? And so now what does it look like here? And then we pull that all the way through to the end of our program. American Studies 2, again, coming back to the Constitution, especially as we're looking at the expansion of executive power across time. How does executive power, how does legislative power ebb and flow by era? And what are the levers on that across time? Right? What causes executive power to expand and sometimes have to expand, as well as legislative power across time throughout American history. And then we really take the deep dive in government, where we're really unpacking the complexities of authoritarian versus democratic systems and how they bear out. And that's not to say this isn't the only time we do this. Like, it all builds to here, where we're looking at implications on the economy. Our students have to learn about the Federal Reserve and what the Federal Reserve does, monetary versus fiscal policy, and how those are used to control our economic system, right? And then how those are different when we go over here to centralized planning systems, which we really delve into in our world history course by the time. So hopefully you can see like that integration piece. But I can assure you, it is in our curriculum. It is spiraled, and we always want to do better. We always want to continue to improve our process and our program, and ensure that our students are receiving the best quality education.
So, and as we go through the other coursework, like world history and some of these other courses, is there any comparative analysis done in the coursework to really reinforce the difference between what we have here in America as far as our government versus governments of the world, both through a historical lens as well as modern day? Are we really making sure that we're making that comparative analysis so our students really actually understand what does make us different here in the United States versus other countries in the world?
And that's so important for our students to understand that, right? To understand their place in our world, in our country, to have that lens of multiple perspectives and one outside necessarily this country. the evolution of American democracy. What were the roots of that? And yes, we do trace that back. What were the roots? We didn't just make it up. Where did it come from? And what are those roots across the world that factor into this evolutionary system of American democracy, but the republic piece too? And that then, I can take you back to our 6th grade course where we end with the fall of Rome and the conceptions of democracy in Athens, comparing it to Sparta, which was not a democracy, right? So those conceptions there. And then when we get into and I'm just speaking to our current curriculum.
Sure, I got you.
In 7th grade, we then get into the fall of Rome to early modern times and the age of absolutism. And this conception of citizenship, and citizenship goes back into Athens, right? So we look at the conception of citizenship there, the conception of citizenship in Rome. What does democracy look like in Rome, and how does it evolve into this conception of republic? And then we pull that in and we look at how that then changes and unfolds during that era of absolutism into the era of exploration and early modern times. That first founding over here in the Americas of colonies. What do those colonies look like? Again, what are the structures that are borrowed from other places and why? Going back to geography, what's the impact of geography on the way the colonies are constructed and the differences and similarities across them? Fast forward, I hope I got to your question. Fast forward, when we get to the 20th century, continually looking at, because it is a century of conflict, compromise, and change, and continually looking at this is the role of America. How does America's role change on the world stage?
Sure.
And what does that look like? And especially when we get into, of course, the Weimar Republic and the rise of authoritarianism across Europe. But that's not the only place authoritarianism. Let's jump over to Japan, which often gets overlooked. And let's talk about, and because again, back in our program, we have addressed the Tokugawa shogunate and peoples of the nations of the world and brought this forward. So it all intertwines. So, yes.
And then back to geography again, because our geography does inform our culture around our democratic republic and how we perceive what democracy should look like, right? And then when we go forward into other countries, we're encountering their culture. And I think President Bush, the second one, when he did the AIDS policy, one of the things that actually was so good and what worked about that was that they went back and said, well, going from a top-down solution was not working to help out folks, but then actually going to the folks and finding out who were their stakeholders in their local community, bringing them into the conversation, and then that's how we have a successful program, right? And that's, and that's the culture.
I'll just close out my thought. I think that really we need to make sure that we're emphasizing the Constitution, because I can tell you when I speak to students and I hear that they can't even name 5 amendments to the U.S. Constitution or our Bill of Rights, it's a problem. It's a major problem because it's our founding document. It controls our society. It informs our rights. It informs our responsibilities. And it certainly also informs students as well as the citizens as a whole as to what the government is limited to do. Hence that difference between authoritarianism and governments. So I think it's important for that to really be emphasized, and I do feel that is missing. Even though you say it's covered, I think that needs to maybe a little revisit on that.
Yeah.
Very welcome.
But, it's a living document, and there's going to be so many different. The whole part of it.
That's a whole worldview. That was
is.
my whole world. So that's my question. But does the state require us to use a specific book or material, or are we? What is our
resource material?
Ability to select? I mean, obviously we have to meet the standard and we need to be aligned, but does that say you will buy book A from this vendor? Or, so we are not that specific, we are able to do that, but are you making that face because we also have a limited supply of what our options are? Is that like?
The state is actually pretty quiet as it relates to social studies textbook.
Okay.
We have an internal textbook adoption regulation that governs how we bring textbooks into the district. That includes teachers, that includes central staff, that includes community members and subject matter experts who make the final decision and bring to the board for approval textbooks we would want to bring into FCP.
So we still have, I mean, because I know that they've started to be a little more intentional with what they're directing us to use for materials, so we don't.
Final say.
Okay.
We bring any textbooks to you for approval.
Okay. And so, okay, so then, kind of follow up on that whole, where we got off on tangent, like, what do we do internally to protect against, you know, viewpoint discrimination, teaching from a particular viewpoint or worldview? For instance, whether or not the Constitution is a living document or not is actually a worldview, and you know, and two different perspectives.
Strict construction, loose construction.
Right. So, but you know what I mean. So it's like, how do we make sure we are not
Only supporting one side or the other.
right, or even just like very simply, like I remember this very
Present both sides
right.
and let people interpret it.
But
for their
even
own.
how we're aligning things. So for instance, I mean, this is years ago because my daughter's a junior or sophomore now. We had a little worksheet, you know, it was from government, you know, whatever, and it says something about like, and one of the questions was about like who is helpful in your community, and one of the questions was the answer that they wanted you to choose was your mayor, and you know, it was a third grade assignment, but even like as a parent reading that, I'm like, well, you have just now told my child that the mayor is a good person. And maybe the mayor is a good person. Maybe the mayor is not a good person. Maybe you live in a community where your mayor is corrupt. You know what I mean? Like, and obviously, you know, third graders getting into all that. But the subtle inclination that government is good. You trust these people. You know what I mean? So, just there's so much of an underlying perspective in our materials like that, which is simple and simplistic, but does give a particular impression. You know what I mean? So like, and it's not a big deal. I mean, obviously, generally we do think that all that is good, but I'm just saying, like, where do we get that in our materials? Like, where are we protecting against kind of those very subtle commentary being injected? How do we handle that?
So first off, I'm going to go back to the overall protection guidance for our district, which is policy 516, the teaching of potentially controversial subjects and the use of historical artifacts. And in that policy, we also have regulation 516.01. That is the implementation piece that provides guardrails around how we engage with students in our classrooms, across all classrooms. I can speak specifically to social studies, but I was part of Craft 516 a number of years ago. And so the purpose there is that there needs to be a curricular connection. If we're talking about controversial and sensitive topics, curricular connection, developmental appropriateness, multiple perspectives, and teacher bias needs to not be part of this conversation. And of course, you know, as human beings, it's always difficult to navigate these situations, but our goal in social studies is, and this harkens back to my first year of teaching 27 years ago with the then curriculum specialist, Mr. Beninsky. We present, we do not promote. We teach students how to think. Look at this document. How do you know it's credible? How can you corroborate the information in it? That's our skills and processes, and that's our goal, right? It's not to prescribe to students, the mayor's a good person. One quick tweak in that sentence is, whose job is it to be? Then we have a different, and those are the things that Mr. Hines and I, as we review materials and as we have our teachers continually review materials and refine what we put out there, to ensure that we are providing the best, most objective opportunities for our students to construct their own viewpoints, because that is the beauty of our system.
So, do we ever consult with people perhaps outside of education? Because I think to evaluate this material, like experts in history, for instance, who are not necessarily currently in academia, working in the academic space, to kind of, I guess, just double check on that, like that small wording issue. Like, is the mayor a good person, or is his job to do a certain thing? You know what I mean? Like, how to do that, like, is to not teach that the Constitution is a living like to not teach from the worldview that the Constitution is a living document, but teach to like, where do we get that alternative view? Because generally speaking, there's a trend in education and academia that leans one political side largely, and not to imply that anybody's doing anything intentionally, but if you don't know what the other side is, how do we ever have like a check of saying like, hey, that's, you think you're being, and your intention is good to be neutral, to just introduce this, but are there subtleties that we're not aware of when you're really like from totally the opposite point of view? Do you know what I mean? How are we checking that, or kind of, are we not doing that? Huh?
It's culture, social, and there's like two things in there, because there's an assessment piece, right? And then how are we also getting
It's
the
just
other
more
point
how
of view?
we're evaluating ourselves to ensure our neutrality, because I absolutely believe the intention is to be neutral.
Okay.
But we don't even know. Like for me, that reading that was, that question was like, you got, you know, like, but other people are going to read that and not. But so I know for sure that that was my bias that made me have that interpretation about that question.
Just to give you a point of preference, it's afternoon at this point.
Oh gosh, sorry. So
Yes,
so anyway, I'm more to think about that,
Yeah.
and that's not a question. It's just a concern.
Thank you. I understand your view.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a lot. It's because we've squinched in a lot. Yes. But let's wrap this up, right?
Is there any final questions for Dr. Menard?
I think we can
thank you
like
very much.
email and can have a conversation.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, hon. Appreciate it. All right.
Okay, well, let's talk about next month.
Next month. Okay.
Okay, so we've got 3 topics on board for June 11th. We have Media Services and Digital Solutions Update, which we did move. We have our District Committee on Assessments, and we have an update from our virtual school.
Oh, good.
And
Okay.
So that's what we have on board.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we've got on board for next. So it is 3 topics.
It is. I will ask my assessment question in an email. I think that'll be better. Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll also bring you a draft calendar for next year. The next that will also be part of our work together next time, is to establish a draft agenda for next year.
Yeah, and then before we had a chance to get here, we were talking about just streamlining what we can do so we get under 2 hours. So, whether it's doing a voiceover with a presentation that's attached to the agenda, and then or whatever it is, but also for us, just making sure we had a chance to take a look at it and clear whatever questions. And then that way for both of us, we got a lunch we got to get to. But
And our anticipations with the new agenda, there'll be 2 topics, so it'll allow for.
Oh, that'll be a little bit more.
Yeah, I think once we get past getting these 3 on there, and then a couple of them are weightier than others too.
And that's hard to sometimes understand which one's going to be like, oh, this is the hot one. So that makes sense.
Well, and there's also a lot of learning happening, so that's good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, that's why we have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you guys very much.
So much. Okay, so we're adjourned, right? 12:04.